All right. Let's see. Looks like everything's going. Okay. Thanks everyone for attending the webcast today. This webcast is hosted by the Center for Watershed Protection, and we were awarded a grant by EPA for this work. And so the webcast is going to be talking about integrating pollution prevention into municipal, tribal, and territorial stormwater programs. We're going to be focusing on our toolkit for EPA Region 2 communities. And this is the first of two webcasts. There's another webcast at the end of May where we'll be focusing on some of the case studies that came out of this work. And my name is Adrienne Cizik. I was the project manager on this project. But it was a big team, and we have several presenters here from our team today. So you're going to be hearing from me for like the first quarter, we'll say, of the webcast, but then we'll move and you'll get some new voices as well. Oops, now I have to figure out how to move the screen. Let's see. There we go. Okay, so the EPA disclaimer that although the information in this presentation has been funded wholly or in part by the EPA, under our agreement with this project, it has not gone through the agency's publications review process and therefore may not necessarily reflect the views of the agency. I did want to point out that our Zoom has capabilities for language captions, and to get to that point, you can go to your Zoom menu bar, click on the ellipses at the bottom that say More, and then you can click on Show Captions. You can select your language that you would prefer to see the captions in and save it, and you should be able to see captions then on your Zoom screen as well. And so anything that I say will be translated through those captions into your preferred language. A couple other housekeeping things. Professional development hours can be gained through this webcast. So all registered attendees who attend the entire webcast will be emailed a PDF certificate of completion template. That certificate can be customizable with your name, although we do want to point out that CEU and PDH requirements do vary by state and entity, so you should verify with your certifying board that this webcast would meet that standard. And today's webcast is being recorded, and there will be this English version and a Spanish version added to the toolkit before the end of May. And this is a link to the toolkit, but also it's going to be linked throughout the presentation, so don't feel like if you miss it on this slide, you're going to miss it altogether. And then a couple other best management practices for webcast participation. There are poll questions throughout the entire webcast. You can answer those by clicking on your selection and then clicking Submit. If you do select Other, there are a few options for Other. If you want to type your more specific answer in the chat box, that would be great. You can access the chat box on that Zoom toolbar at the bottom, the same place that I pointed out for the captions. You can chat either with everyone, which includes everybody, panelists and attendees, or just with the speakers and the host, which is just panelists. So all attendees are muted throughout the webcast, but if you do have a question, you can use the chat box again to ask the question, and then our Center for Watershed Protection host will relay those questions from the chat box to the group. We do have a couple breakpoints throughout the webcast for questions, so we'll stop and make sure we're addressing them at those points. We do have a post-webcast evaluation form, and we ask that you do fill that out. It does give us a lot of feedback and help us sort of hone in on anything that we need to update or change for the next time. Okay, so our first poll question, where in Region 2, EPA Region 2, do you work? And we'll give it a little bit here for people to answer. And if it looks like there's several coming in as other, if you guys just want to put maybe where you are from in the chat box, that would be great. Okay, it looks like actually not too many people from EPA Region 2 are here. Chris, if you want to share results. We have several from New York, and then a lot of people from all over, which is, it's great to see you. Welcome, everyone. I think a lot of this is going to be applicable as well elsewhere outside of Region 2. How many people are participating in the webcast today from your location? It looks to me like, I don't know, let's see, most people have answered, about 3/4 of you have answered. A lot of people joining on their own and a few small groups, it looks like. Okay, third poll question. Who are you representing today? And there's a variety of options: municipality, local government, a state government, federal government, Indian nation, United States territory, private consultant, nonprofit organization, university, or other. All right, we are at about 3/4 again submitted. Looks like we have a lot of people from either a municipal or state government here. Okay, and then one last poll for the beginning here, making sure you guys are paying attention. What is your role in municipal, tribal, or territorial operations? You could be an administrator, a coordinator, compliance inspector, engineer, or other specialist. Do you do monitoring, planning? Are you field staff, boots on the ground, or something else? Okay, it's looking like as they come in, I see several administrators and coordinators, some specialists, but I'd say pretty across the board. Some people do many things, it looks like, as well. All right, thanks for everyone for participating in those polls. We're going to start to jump in to the webcast and more of the meat of the webcast, at least. I did want to give you just a little background on, on who the Center for Watershed Protection is. We are a national nonprofit that was founded in 1992 with the mission to advance clean water resources and healthy ecosystems through responsible land and water management. We have 25 people on staff with a variety of different disciplines. We are headquartered in Maryland, but we do have offices along the East Coast and a little bit into the Midwest. Oops, there we go. We have 4 sort of arms or programs with the Center for Watershed Protection: applied research, membership, training and education, and watershed and stormwater consulting services. And you guys can visit our website for more details if you're interested in looking more into who we are and what we do. So the webcast outline for today is that we're going to give a introduction to this EPA project that we did, and a little bit of background on why we're doing it. And then we'll introduce the toolkit. And then we'll get into more of the meat of the toolkit, a little background and overview on our spigot tool, and then a little more background and overview of our Stormwater P2 calculator suite. And then depending on the time at the end, we'll try to do a choose your own adventure with the toolkit. Okay, so jumping into introduction and background to the project. As I mentioned, this is an EPA funded project called Pollution Prevention and Good Housekeeping Toolkit and Trainings. The project started in June 2023 and is ending in a couple weeks. The project includes an online toolkit of pollution prevention and good housekeeping guidance, tools, and training. We're also including pollution prevention training, and it serves the EPA Region 2 communities, New York, New Jersey, Indian Nations, U.S. Virgin Islands, and Puerto Rico. Our expected outcome is that we would advance the capacity of municipal, territorial, and tribal governments and other organizations in EPA Region 2 to prevent and reduce polluted runoff from governmental operations. So starting at the beginning, what is pollution prevention? Pollution prevention is defined as any practice that reduces, eliminates, or prevents pollution at its source before it is created. We have this figure on the right that sort of illustrates both what pollution prevention is and what it isn't. It really focuses on source control. It's the highest, most preferable way to eliminate pollution. It is in preference over reuse or recycling, treating pollutants once they're in the environment, and waste management. There are many co-benefits to pollution prevention, including cost savings, protecting public health, and reducing water and energy use. Typically, P2 is aimed at industry, but it can be extrapolated to government operations as well. Ways that you can reduce pollutants through P2 is equipment and technology modifications, process or procedure modifications, reformulation or redesign of products, substitution of raw materials, and improvements in housekeeping, maintenance, training, and inventory control. Next, what is good housekeeping? This is different. Pollution prevention good housekeeping is a minimum control measure, number 6, for MS4 permits. So this MS4 permits are for municipal permits issued, discharge permits for municipal entities. So really focusing on municipal operations. Requirements include preventing or reducing the amount of stormwater pollution generated by municipal operations and conveyed into receiving waters. Focus on training employees on how to incorporate good housekeeping techniques into municipal operations, and identifying appropriate best management practices and measurable goals for preventing and reducing pollutants generated by municipal operations. So specifically looking at hotspot facility management, street sweeping, storm drain maintenance, and a variety of different other activities. So P2 is, again, just for review, reducing the amount of pollutants used, so source reduction, and good housekeeping focuses on keeping those pollutants from the stormwater. Separately, they're very broad or big groups of activities, but we're really focusing with this project on the nexus of the P2 and the good housekeeping. Keeping pollutants, source control for pollutants that would otherwise contaminate stormwater from municipal operations. And because EPA Region 2 does have a variety of geographies and different permit structures and governance structures, we are expanding the term municipal operation and to include territorial and tribal government operations as well. Okay, so this is the stormwater regulatory status in EPA Region 2. The geographic area, as I mentioned before, includes New York, New Jersey, Puerto Rico, U.S. Virgin Islands, and Indian Nations. The first 3 do have existing MS4 permits regulations in place, although a little bit different. New York and New Jersey are enforced by the state. Puerto Rico is implemented by EPA. But these existing MS4 permits do put in place good housekeeping minimum control measure, which is a way to access this P2 good housekeeping nexus. U.S. Virgin Islands and Indian Nations do have discharge permits that are under EPA regulatory authority, although what that looks like varies both between USVI and Indian Nations, and also between the different Indian Nations in the United States. So it's a little bit more ambiguous about how P2 sort of fits into the existing permit structure, but there's a lot of places I think we can find some opportunities. So step 1 of this project was a needs assessment. We did partner outreach. We hosted listening sessions in New York, New Jersey, Puerto Rico, and the U.S. Virgin Islands. We attended an in-person Indian Nations leaders meeting in New York and visited some of the Indian Nation sites. We did an in-person meeting in Puerto Rico. And we formulated a P2 advisory committee. And then we did a report that basically summarized the findings from that needs assessment. So what we learned from that initial task. There are several existing resources on MS4 Good Housekeeping in New York and New Jersey, which makes sense since they have MS4 permits, and that is one of the requirements of those permits. Many of the identified training and assistance needs, or those needs identified by the regions, have to do with just meeting the MS4 permit requirements. Some of the pollution problems identified, they do not have an obvious P2 solution, particularly abandoned vehicles and tire dumping. Again, P2 is a source reduction, so if your pollutant is vehicles or tires, it's hard to, it's not an easy solution to just reduce those, let's just say that. We also learned that common challenges include limited staff, funding, and organizational capacity to meet permit requirements or address P2 in any capacity, really. And some P2 efforts, such as incentive programs or additional research, they are typically not undertaken by stormwater agencies. Oh, and another one. There are no existing resources or examples of that P2 stormwater integration nexus. So I think that shows a good need for this project. So our approach based on that needs assessment for this toolkit included that the following. Since no one is currently doing this, we do need to be somewhat innovative. We did convene a P2 advisory committee in fall 2024 to help both flesh out the approach, but then sort of create points of review and checkpoints throughout the development of the toolkit, so that we can make sure that we were able to get the most innovative information out there included. We didn't want to make P2 an additional requirement or a burden for government entities, so we really wanted to focus on what communities are already doing and helping them make connections between programs, and also helping them to quantify the benefits, as this helps to support continued implementation of those programs. We wanted to help communities implement action, so we both developed case studies of entities within EPA Region 2 that were had actions being implemented that directly addressed that nexus, and then also created guidance tools to help with both decision support and evaluation of actions. And really just wanted to keep the focus on the P2 Good Housekeeping nexus. There's a lot of information out there on P2. There's a lot of information out there on good housekeeping. The point of the toolkit is to sort of really hone in on that, so we can optimize and be very specific and complete with our resources within the toolkit that address P2, stormwater, and government operations. So what does it look like to look at P2 municipal and tribal and territorial stormwater sector? In terms of pollutants, we focused on all water pollutants. When we're looking at pollutant sources, we're looking at non-point stormwater sources. When we're looking at activities, P2 activities, we're looking at source reduction related to municipal, tribal, territorial operations, or things that these entities have control over. And when we're looking at benefits, we want to look at water quality benefits, reduce greenhouse gas emissions, water conservation, reduce toxins, and cost savings. So we did a review of municipal, tribal, territorial operations to try to categorize these operations, and we came up with 6 general categories: winter road maintenance, construction and maintenance, procurement and regulations, vehicle and fleet management, parks and landscaping, and public facility management. If we look at parks and landscaping category, and this is true for within all of these categories, but as an example, parks and landscaping, there are P2 actions associated with each of those operations. This is just an example of within parks and landscaping, what action, P2 action, could be taken, and then what stormwater pollutant is being addressed by that action. So converting mowed areas to native plant gardens and tree planting. When you do that, you're reducing nutrient sediments and pesticides. You could use the water sense program and efficient irrigation systems to conserve water. That's a P2 action, and in doing that, you're reducing nutrients. You can convert electric lawn maintenance equipment and convert typical gasoline-powered lawn maintenance equipment to electric. And when you do that, you're reducing oils and fuels. So it kind of goes throughout all the actions associated with each operation. And this is true for all the operations that I showed on the previous slide as well. When we identified different resources, we wanted to look both at existing resources and where those gaps were in the existing resources. So in our review of existing resources, we tried to prioritize EPA Region 2 resources. However, once we did that, there were some gaps, or there was just really good resources that weren't directly from EPA Region 2, and so we filled those gaps using resources from outside of EPA Region 2. And the resources that we looked at included manuals, guidances, tools, checklists, example codes and regulations, outreach materials, and case studies. We also, through this project, created new resources. Again, we did a gaps analysis of what existing resources were out there, whether or not there were gaps in those resources, but also aiming to really connect the dots between the P2 and the stormwater and the municipal operations. And so we did develop, say, 3 categories of things to help fill those gaps through this project. One is we developed an opportunities assessment. It's called Spigot. It's a tool. We also developed impact assessment tools. That is in our Stormwater P2 calculator suite. And then we interviewed and developed case studies around EPA Region 2 groups that were already implementing P2 actions that met that nexus point. Okay, so the toolkit, the actual toolkit that we designed is an online platform. And here again is the link for it if you want to explore. The reason we decided to do an online platform is because it's easy to access from different device types. So a lot of people use their phones or they're in the field, and you can access resources that way. It's also searchable, so you can focus in on what your user needs are. It supports multiple different types of resources, so not only documents, but videos, links, things like that, tools. We also, and it allows for interactive tools, which we also incorporated into there, some of which we created through this project. It also allows for accessibility, so we do have translation services on the toolkit, but and there's also other accessibility needs addressed through our accessibility toolbar. Okay, and I do want to acknowledge the listening session participants that help support this project. We had quite a few. I'm not going to read all of them. From New York, New Jersey, Puerto Rico, U.S. Virgin Islands, and Indian nations. I also wanted to call out our P2 Advisory Committee participants who gave a bit of extra time of their time. As I mentioned, we pulled together the P2 committee in fall of 2024, and they're actively reviewing right now the toolkit. So through the end of May, they'll be giving their time to this project. Walter, Mary McSwan, Chris Abrupta, Blue Nels, Connor Shea, and Les Benedict. And then also case study contributors. So people did give their time and allow us to interview them to get more information on the work that they've been doing, the P2 Stormwater Nexus work that they've been doing. So that we have several case studies that we've developed through this project. Chris with Rutgers, SUNY helped, and USVI, Virgin Islands Conservation Society helped, the New York Department of Environmental Conservation, and then the St. Regis Mohawk Tribe Plant Nursery as well. Okay, and then also just to point out that our toolkit does include webcasts, including this webcast, and then our next upcoming webcast. This webcast is really focusing on the introduction to the toolkit, with the second webcast focusing on the case studies, and so concrete examples of that P2 Stormwater Nexus. Okay, so that's the project background. I'm going to jump right into just introducing you all to the toolkit, and then we're going to break after that for questions. So if you just give me 1 second to pull up the toolkit, actually, never mind. First I have one slide. Sorry about that. So this is the landing page as well as the link for the toolkit. I did want to just highlight that this project does go through the end of May. And we are, as I mentioned, our P2 advisory committee is reviewing the toolkit right now. And then also we have some other things that we're going to be modifying slightly on the toolkit. So the final edits to this toolkit will be made by May 31st, but it is a soft launch, so you guys can still access it right now. Okay, that's all I had to say. Let's jump into the toolkit. Oh, that's not what I want. There we go. So if you click on that link or go to that QR code, this is where you should land. And this is the toolkit. This is the toolkit right here. A couple of things I want to point out as you go through the toolkit. One is that the toolkit is a part of the Center for Watershed Protection's online watershed library. So I gave you the link in the slides in the webcast. But if you lose the link or whatever, you can't access it, you should be able to access it through the Center for Watershed Protection Library, online watershed library. And if you go to the CWP collections or just look down and featured, you can see this is the toolkit right here. So if you click on that, you are then in the toolkit again. We do have an accessibility toolbar, which allows you to change the language of the written words on the website into, I think there's 130 language options, so there's quite a few to choose from. And then when you get here, you get the title of the toolkit, a little bit of the description. So the first 15 minutes of this Zoom webcast is kind of consolidated into this writing, these two paragraphs here. And this is a more updated Venn diagram, more comprehensive, I should say, Venn diagram than the one I showed you before. Because we're looking at, again, the nexus of the municipal, tribal, and territorial government operations, pollution prevention, or P2, and stormwater pollution. And from that, you get water savings, greenhouse gas emission reduction, and cost savings. And so that sort of illustrates, again, what this toolkit is addressing. Moving through the toolkit, you do get a little brief on how to get started. And because some people coming to the toolkit might already know what they're looking for. I know that I want to look for how I can better manage my road salt. So they might jump right to step 2 here, but we wanted to do so you're coming to this toolkit, where to start, and then kind of walks you through the different options progressively as you work through it. So like I said, some people might come in at step 2, some people might come in at step 3, but you might come in not knowing exactly what you're looking for, in which case you would start at step 1, which is the operations assessment. And so we provide a tool called Spigot, which Julie's going to talk about after I do this overview of the toolkit. And that will help you look at your governmental operations and decide where there are opportunities for pollution prevention. Once you know where those opportunities are, you can move towards finding resources to support those actions. That's step 2, and that's basically looking through the resources in the toolkit. Step 3 is integrating Stormwater P2 into your governmental operations, and to support that, we do have case studies highlighted that provide examples, as I mentioned, of these concrete examples. And their case studies include ones developed through this project, but there are also case studies from other places developed by other entities that we've also pulled in as well. And then you will want to evaluate your progress using some sort of calculator. So we do provide a Stormwater P2 calculator suite, which has a variety of calculator options, which several of our staff members will be talking about in a little bit in more detail, but also we've provided a variety of other calculators as well that support P2 and stormwater. Okay, so once you kind of know where you're entering the toolkit, I was searching some things earlier, but there is a search bar. So if you know exactly what you're going to look for, such as maybe you want to look for plastics, which was up there before, you can search. We'll just search for plastic, and it will bring you to all the resources that talk about plastic in the toolkit come up. So again, note that we are in the Center for Watershed Protection online watershed library, but you know you're still in the toolkit because we have this this option still selected. And from here, there's some broader filters, I'll say, that you can filter by. As you go through, you can filter by geography, although it's not EPA Region 2 geography. There's different, more spatial geographies. And then there's a variety of other things, material, subtype, things like that. Okay, so that's the search bar. And then moving further through the toolkit, we do have featured resources, which are primarily resources that were created through this project. So we have our Stormwater Pollution Prevention and Government Operations tool, which is Spigot. And Julie's going to talk about that again just right after this. So if you click on it, you get to a tool. And we also have the case studies developed under this project, which are Region 2 specific. Also P2 Stormwater Government Operations specific. And I think we have some of them up from this that I listed in the previous part of the presentation, but not all of them are up yet, but they will be by the end of the project. We'll have webinars, including this one, and then we have our Stormwater P2 Calculator Suite. If you click on this right now, you will it says it's coming soon. We haven't fully launched that yet, but we will go in more detail later in the presentation so you can see what's coming. Moving through, again, the toolkit, you can browse the resources within the toolkit by applicable EPA Region 2 geography. So you can, if you click on that, you can get everything that is applicable to New Jersey. And once you're in here, you can either search by learning material subtype, or you can search by P2 government operation. So you can kind of hone in on what you're looking for specifically that way. The next thing is we can also just browse resources by the government operation. These are the 6 categories that I talked about earlier. So behind these are specific P2 actions that were driven by what resources were available, and then other actions that we had to develop a couple of resources for. But this should cover a lot of government actions. So again, if you click on that, one of the government actions, it gives you a description of what is included within that government action. So powering, maintaining, cleaning, repairing, and storing publicly owned fleets. And then it also talks about different P2 opportunities, such as conducting regular vehicle inspections, changing materials or processes to use less harmful chemicals, and converting fleets from gasoline to electric to reduce oils and spills. And once you're in here, you again can search by learning material subtype, or you can search by region. Moving through the toolkit, we do highlight different tools for quantifying P2 benefits. A lot of these are created by other entities outside of this project, but there's just a large variety of them. And I think Lisa will be touching base a little bit more on these, and then why we developed our own as well. And lastly, on the toolkit, we do have P2 resources from EPA specifically, and this kind of just helps. These would be national resources that are go beyond stormwater and government, but they can be useful. So EPA does have a pollution prevention website. They do have a Safer Choice program, which provides alternative products to help reduce pollution, and then the WaterSense program. So that is the toolkit in a nutshell. I'm going to go ahead and, let's see here, break for questions, I believe is the next thing. Chris, did you see any questions come in? I haven't really been watching.
There has not been any questions as of yet.
Okay. So yeah, now I guess if you guys want to write questions throughout as they come to your head, feel free. If you have any other questions, feel free to drop them in the chat as we continue. Let's see. So next up is Julie talking about our spigot tool.
Okay. Thanks, Adrian.
Mm-hmm.
Hello, everyone. Adrian provided a nice overview of the website, and I'm going to go back to the website and I put the link in the chat for everyone to access. So I'm excited to present to you our tool that we developed. This is the Stormwater Pollution Prevention and Government Operations Tool, or SPIGOT. We like a good acronym. So the purpose is to allow governments to review their operations um, and look for ways to reduce or address stormwater pollution prevention in those operations. And so the tool will then give you actions that you can take. Okay, next slide. So this was developed based on all the input from our advisory committee, from all our listening sessions with tribes and territories in the states that Adrian had spoke about and listed everyone that was involved. Um, they had given us all their pollutant concerns. This is just sort of a summary here. So we were able to take all these and try to provide resources and address these um, pollution generated activities. As Adrian mentioned, some of these don't fall under the pollution prevention category, like there is abandoned vehicles, junkyards. Um, so those were not included, but just letting you know like where this came from. So this was sort of generated based on input from um, the advisory committee, etc. Next slide. So Adrian had shown this, and this graphic is on the website as well. But right, oh, can you click again, Adrian? Thanks. So this tool can be your way to start to review what activities, what actions should we be taking as a government, as a tribe or territory or municipality to help address pollution prevention. So this is one of the steps. Um, this is sort of the first step in assessing your operations to addressing pollution prevention. And now I am going to take you to the actual tool on the website. So if you want to stop sharing, Adrian, and I will share my screen here. Okay. Can you all see that? Okay. I'm going to assume you can see it. So again, here we are on the website. This is the Spigot tool. So you go to the website, click on this, and it's going to take you into the tool. I should note, so us at the center, the staff developed all the input that goes into this tool, but the interface that was developed is done using AI. So just a little disclaimer, but it was all the input, it was quality controlled by us. Okay, so this is the tool. Um, Just an overview. So we're going to use the spigot to evaluate your government operations and address stormwater pollution prevention in those operations to identify actions to integrating pollution prevention in your community. So there's 3 steps here. The first step is screening, looking at your operations and deciding which ones you want to focus on. The next one is your pollution prevention assessment. So based on the operations you selected, it's going to provide you with some questions to answer about how you the practices you do within those operations. And that's going to then result in some actions that as some actions that you can take to um, implement some pollution prevention actions. Okay, so let's go into this. We're going to click begin screening. Smooth this up a little. Okay, so here we are on the first step. So this lists all six of the government operations that Adrienne had shown before in her presentation. And I'm going to scroll through here. So we have parks and landscaping, winter road maintenance, construction and maintenance, vehicle and fleet management, public facility management, and procurement and regulations. And for each, oops, um, so for each operation, there's a definition of what it is. So for public facility management, this is the operation and maintenance of your outdoor hardscape portions of your publicly owned facilities. So this would include municipal buildings, public work yards, public swimming pools, etc. It lists what potential pollutants of concern could be, and pollution prevention opportunities that can be taken. So this is focusing on changing the materials or processes used to clean the buildings, etc., reducing toxic pollutants being used, um, as well as inventorying products that you have, that you currently have, and maybe changing those out with something less toxic. Um, I'm going to scroll up here. Okay. And then for each operation, you decide two questions. It gives you two questions. The first is, does your government control these operations? So if I'm a local township and I have and we take care of our own vehicles, then I'm going to say yes, we have control over this operation. Maybe you don't. It's not applicable. This isn't part of your government, or you're not sure. So I'm going to select yes. And then the next question is, how important is this operation as a pollution source in your community? So maybe you've been wanting to take a closer look at operations within vehicle and fleet management. So the answers are you can rank it as high, medium, or low. If you select high or medium, then it's going to take you to the next step and give you those assessment questions. If you select low, then it's not going to give you those questions. So let's select high. And we'll do one more. I'm going to go up to winter road maintenance. Maybe you have in your community a chloride impairment in your streams. So you need to take a look at reducing chloride in the winter or using alternative methods. So again, I'm going to select yes. We have control over this operation, and I'm going to select it. I'm going to select it as medium just to show you that it still appears. So you do not have to fill out each operation. You decide which ones are most important. Okay, so I'm going to scroll down here. And then we go to the next step, which is going to show us our priorities, which we just selected. So up at the top, it gives us those six operations that we saw in the previous screening step. And it shows we have low priority for four of them because we didn't fill them out. But we decided that winter road maintenance and vehicle and fleet management we put as higher maintenance or higher priority, sorry. Winter road maintenance, we actually listed it as medium, but it comes up, it just appears here as a high priority for assessing those practices within that operation. So as we scroll down, again, you don't have to fill out all the questions, but we listed winter road maintenance as high priority to assess. So it is now giving us a series of questions to further assess those practices within winter road maintenance. As well as down below, it has questions around vehicle and fleet management. So, for example, we have the question of, does your community use environmentally friendly products for vehicle washing? And the answers are the same as previous. They're yes, no, NA, or unknown. So if you answer yes to this, you're saying we're already doing this, right? So that's great. If you answer no, then it's going to prompt in the next step, the recommendations, it's going to give you a recommendation to address that potential pollution source. Okay, so I'm going to fill out a few of these. One down here is, does your community have procedures in place to replace gas-powered vehicles with hybrid or electric vehicles? And I'm going to say no, and then I'm going to go back up. Oop, scroll up here to winter road maintenance, fill out some of these questions. So does your community have a salt management plan? Nope. Um, do you use anti-icing, such as salt brine, before rainfall? And again, I'm going to say no, just to show you how we get recommended actions. So then I'm going to go back down. And again, you can fill out all these questions. You can fill out just the ones that you are interested in. It's up to you. So now we're going to go to the next step, the last step, which is view recommended actions. So this site, for questions that you answered no, and actually also if you answer unknown, it's going to give you a recommendation. So, for example, under winter road maintenance, the question was, do you have a salt management plan? And we said, nope. So the action that it's giving you is to adopt a salt management plan that identifies best management practices to reduce negative environmental impacts of road salt, while also having safe roads. Okay. And so here's your all the recommended actions. It also lists the pollutants that it will address. And then down here, you can print this to a PDF so you can share it with others in your community, and get more information on those practices. But I want to go back up to the top here. This is kind of cool. So for each question, I highlighted how it shows the pollutants or co-benefits that it addresses. Well, up here at the top, you can filter by those pollutants and co-benefits. So again, if I say I have a chloride impairment in my stream that I need to address, so I'm going to click on chloride and it's going to give me all the actions that'll help me reduce chloride through these practices, which are the winter road maintenance actions. Um, and then it also highlights which practices are going to save you money, reduce greenhouse gas emissions, and conserve water. So this can really help you focus on addressing um, regulatory requirements, etc., in your municipality. Okay, so Scroll down here. And you can also start over. You can go back and say, oh, I really wanted to answer some more questions. Let me go down again. You can go back to screening. You can start over completely. Okay. So you've gone through the tool, the spigot. You've identified which operations are of priority to you. You've answered the assessment questions and have a set of actions. So what's the next step? Adrian had walked through this website, and I just want to kind of link it back that now you can go and you can search in the toolbar for more information on alternative salt practices, and or you could look down here in the winter and road maintenance resources. Okay, so that is a quick overview of the spigot. I'd encourage you to, work through it, try it out, test it out. And next, we're going to have Lisa, you're going to talk about our calculators so you can quantify the benefit of implementing these actions. Okay, so I'm going to stop sharing. Lisa, you want to go ahead?
Yep, thanks, Julie. Just waiting for the slides to come back up. There we go. Um, so next we're going to talk about the stormwater pollution prevention calculator suite that was developed. And Adrian, can you go to the next slide? Okay, so you just heard from Julie. The first step was assessing operations and how you can use the Spigot tool to do that. Adrian kind of walked you through the toolkit, showing you the resources that are available, how to search for them. The third step would be integrating stormwater pollution prevention into your operations. And then the last step that we're going to talk about now is, now that you've done all that, how do you go about evaluating the progress? And so this step is really important to quantify how much pollution has been reduced, as well as the associated benefits, things like cost savings and water conservation and greenhouse gas reduction. Um, Evaluating progress is really important to, showing how successful your pollution prevention program is. And it's also a step where you can document progress towards meeting any type of regulatory requirements you have. So, for example, like good housekeeping as part of your MS4 permit requirements. And it also helps you assess which P2 actions are the most cost effective for future implementation. So, if maybe you've gone through this process and you've implemented a bunch of actions, you want to see how they're working or not to inform how you move forward. Do you keep doing those actions? Do you maybe move on to some alternative actions? So next slide. So we first started out by compiling, doing a search, compiling all of the existing calculators and tools that are out there that we could find related to pollution prevention for stormwater purposes. And you can find them on the toolkit. And as you can see here, a lot of them are related to like green fleets, so converting like gasoline over to electric vehicles. We have found one related to converting gas-powered landscaping equipment over to electric equipment. There's a few on here related to water savings. And then there's also a series of calculators that are put out by the EPA, which are really great resources related to hazardous waste and pollution reduction, as well as cost savings and greenhouse gas reduction. And I think the EPA calculators are a really great resource, but they do cover the whole broad range of pollution prevention. So it's not just stormwater. There's a lot of information in those calculators. And then the other thing to note, I guess, about the EPA calculators is just that in many cases, depending on what you're trying to calculate, you have to kind of come into it with knowing a little bit about how much pollution you've reduced. So maybe you might have to know like how many pounds of a pollutant you reduced or how many gallons of gas you saved before you actually start working with the spreadsheet tool. So next slide. So what we developed for this project was a more streamlined series of calculator tools that are focused specifically on pollution prevention related to stormwater, that help you calculate the pollution prevention and all the associated environmental and economic benefits. Adrian had mentioned earlier that there was a series of case studies developed. And if you come to the next webinar, I think it was May 28th, you'll be able to hear more about those. But for each of those case studies, we had to calculate the impact. So looking at how much pollution was prevented, and then the cost savings, water savings, and greenhouse gas reduction, which aligns with how EPA determines measurable results related to pollution prevention. And this process was really good for us because it allowed us to come up with methods to do those calculations. And we then took those methods, generalized them a little bit so they could be used for other purposes, and put them into this stormwater pollution prevention calculator suite so that they could be used beyond just our case studies. We might be useful in other applications that you all are working on as well. I will say that we are still working on refining the final version. I think Adrian mentioned if you go to the toolkit right now, there's just kind of a coming soon. So we're looking at refining the current calculators as well as potentially adding in a couple of additional calculators. And Sammy, Deb, and Paige are going to give you a preview of the calculator, how it was developed, and kind of run through some of the existing calculators that are included in it now. So Sammy, I will hand it over to you.
Thank you, Lisa, for the introduction. Now I will talk about the P2 calculator suite. So this slide gives a high-level overview of what the calculator suite does. The calculator suite is actually a web-based planning tool that helps users estimate the potential environmental and cost impacts of different pollution prevention activities. The basic idea is that the user enters local information such as quantities, equipment use, site conditions, or fleet assumptions, and the tool applies built-in equations and assumptions to estimate the potential reduction or cost changes. The outputs are intended to be planning level estimates. These are not meant to replace like detailed engineering design or site-specific modeling, but they can help communities compare different pollution prevention options and better understand the potential benefits of such activities. Across the calculators, the tool can estimate like common metrics such as greenhouse gas or carbon dioxide equivalent reductions, water savings, pollutant reductions, and material reductions, and also cost changes. So in simple terms, the calculator should actually help translate pollution prevention activities or practices into measurable outcomes to track progress. Next slide. We actually so far have developed 5 calculators in the suite. The first calculator is a single-use plastic reduction calculator. This tool estimates the potential benefits of reducing or eliminating the use of single-use plastic items such as plastic water bottles, grocery bags, straws, or other utensils. The outputs include estimated reductions in plastic use, greenhouse gas emissions, water use, and cost. The sustainable planting calculator, the second one, this compare different planting categories against the turf grass baseline. Paige, my colleague Paige, will describe and will show a demo of how the calculator works. The third calculator is the winter road salt calculator. This estimates the impact of switching from the conventional road salt to an alternative de-icer. It looks at outputs such as greenhouse gas emissions, chloride reduction into your stormwater, social cost of carbon, and potential infrastructure-related benefits such as the overall cost. Next slide, please, Adrian. The last 2 calculators are landscape equipments and greener fleets. The landscaping equipment calculator compare gas-powered landscaping equipment with battery electric alternatives. It uses information such as the type of your landscape equipment, your region, your operating hours, how long you are using the instrument, the fuel cost, And then it gives outputs such as gasoline spillage reduction in your stormwater, annual cost change, and of course, carbon dioxide reduction. I will not go too much detail into the greener fleets because Deb will give a detailed demo after I finish my presentation. And now I will talk about how the calculators was developed and deployed. Adrian, next slide. This slide actually quickly summarized the overall workflow. The process actually started with development of spreadsheets. Each spreadsheets contain the technical information needed for the calculator, including the equations, the assumptions, the constants, and the conversion vectors. These spreadsheets were the technical basis of the entire tool. In next step, the spreadsheets were uploaded into a GitHub repo, and the GitHub was used to host the source files, all the spreadsheets. And then an AI assistant coding workflow was used to convert the spreadsheet calculator into a web interface. The important point here, the AI was used for coding and interface development only. It was not used to create the equations or the assumptions or override any technical basis behind the workflow logic. And the third final product is the web interface itself, which I will show you after I present you the next slide. Adrian, next slide. So a lot of people ask questions whenever AI is used. So this gives a quick overview of what was controlled during the deployment. The technical foundation, all the assumptions and constant were developed by our team. Those are extracted from peer-reviewed journal articles and federal or state technical reports. None of these informations was developed by AI. And we always make sure guardrails during the AI assistant coding process. That AI coding workflow was limited to converting the spreadsheet content into a web interface and nothing else. We always took care that AI was not generating any new equations, new assumptions, or new calculation methods. Its sole role was to translate the existing spreadsheet logic into an online format or web format. And we also actually added a Spanish version. However, the conversion of the English to Spanish text was entirely done by AI-assisted workflow, and later this was queued by one of the staff member who actually speaks Spanish. So the key takeaway is that the calculator content and technical logic came from our entire project team and the spreadsheet-based calculators, which are uploaded in GitHub. Once we finally publish the web pages, users will have access to our GitHub pages, so they can also double check what were the codes that was used, because once the web interface will be deployed, the entire GitHub page will be made public. Now, if Adrian, can you please stop sharing the screen, then I can show how one of the calculator works. Can you see my screen?
Not yet. It's still dark.
Can you see it now?
Yes, now you can see it.
Okay. Yeah. So this is the web link. Right now, we have not shared it, but after we have finalized all the entire web page, we will publish the web pages. So if someone goes into the single-use plastic reduction tab and put in, like, for example, they're reducing the use of one plastic water bottle, one plastic grocery bag, one plastic straws, and one plastic utensils. At first, this tab will show an overview of the estimated impact of reduction, like plastic, CO2 avoided, water saved, and cost impact. And it will also give you an item by item breakdown as well. And at the third box, you will also see all the assumptions and the data sources that were used to do these calculations. And users, of course, will have the options to override any of the assumptions. So like if they don't like this number of weight per unit bottle, they can change it, and then the calculations and the final output will automatically be modified. Yeah, now I will again stop sharing my screen, and then Paige and Deb will show a demo of how the other tabs work. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Paige Buzard. I'm going to be sharing my screen to talk about the sustainable planting calculator. So let me try to. Can you see the calculator on my screen?
No, I can't see it.
No,
Paige.
it doesn't look like you're sharing anything.
How about now?
I see it.
Now we can see it.
Okay, perfect. So the Sustainable Planting Impact Calculator looks at how your potential planting selection for a specific site compares to that of lawn. So it looks at the impacts of your landscape plant classification, which we have established and defined here in the calculator, and how those impacts relate to supplemental watering needs and supplemental fertilization that your project site might need. It is dependent on climate and rainfall data. So for example, I'll put in my zip code for here in New Jersey, which will source right to EPA climate data for evapotranspiration and rainfall data by month. I'll estimate a project site area just for the purposes of using this calculator. And before it goes into additional outputs, we have to finalize our inputs. So the project landscape classification talks about what sort of plants are you selecting to go into this proposed project site. We're hoping that by making smarter choices that have the water reduction and fertilization reduction needs, such as native or drought tolerant species or even wildflower and meadow mixes, you'll see a reduction in those necessary maintenance inputs. So for these purposes, I'll select natives, and you can see that it comes up with a plant factor and nitrogen fertilization factors that are associated with those types of plants. So then, for example, if I was to select maybe a higher maintenance type of landscape category, those plant factors and nitrogen need factors would change as well. The inputs for the calculator also ask you to look at the NRCS hydrologic soil group, whether that's A, B, C, or D. The general input will be set at B, but you can change it if you know what your soil type is. We also ask if you plan to apply mulch to your site, and thinking ahead, even just at the planning standpoint, you can decide whether you'd like to apply mulch or not. This will impact the supplemental irrigation factors. And if you decide later on to compare whether mulch helps or doesn't help your site, you can always come back and change this in part one. For these purposes, I'm going to pretend like I am considering applying fertilizer to this specific project site. And now you'll see that we have additional information that populates after you've selected your inputs. Part two comes up with supplemental irrigation calculations for our designed landscape and compares it against a baseline of turf. So from that climate data and your peak rainfall month and evapotranspiration months, we see how much water the plants in your design landscape would need compared to how much water during your peak rainfall month, your peak watering month that turf would need. So kind of as expected, a native plant selection might require no additional watering. And assuming that we're comparing it against a site that would have been turf, we get a reduction in the irrigation for that month. You can override these and look at additional months, not just your peak rainfall month, to get a broader scope of how much water is reduced. Part 3 looks at supplemental fertilizer reduction, once again comparing your designed or proposed landscape to a turf baseline. And the assumptions here are that if you're planting native plants or one of the other preferred landscape classifications, then you are not applying nitrogen, or that there's not as much additional nutrients required for the growth of those plants in that landscape. And then using your soil type is how we get to the amount of nitrogen reduction for runoff. Looking at slopes and soil types and infiltration, this is how we're kind of assuming what amount of the fertilization applied could potentially become a stormwater pollutant. And I think as Julie and Lisa had mentioned, we also looked at some case studies. So this plastic container reduction is a sort of bonus that was inspired by our case study from the St. Regis Mohawk Native Plant Nursery. So if you're looking at potentially sourcing your plants as bare root, that would cause a reduction in the amount of plastic you're consuming, and plastic that would go to landfill or sit on your site or at your municipality. This calculator asks for a couple of more inputs. So if you generally know that your plants are going to be spaced at 24 inches on center, you can estimate that here, and then select whether you're intending on planting container plants or seedlings and plugs. So I'll stick with container plants and assume that maybe I can get 45% of my plants sourced as bare root. We've kind of, in the background, summed up how much plastic per plant pot from basic pot sizes and come up with how much plastic in pounds your quantity of plants would result in. So by selecting 45% of your plant material as bare root, we can look at a rough estimate for how much plants of plastic is avoided. And once again, on this calculator, we have our assumptions and data sources that look at where some of these conclusions and assumptions were made from. Additional monthly climate data and calculation breakdowns can be found by opening this tab here. And this brings in the information from the climate resource on evaporation rates per month and peak rainfall in inches per month. So this is looking at July for where my greatest watering needs would be. And once again, this breaks out some of those background calculations that are taking place when looking at how you're planning your specific project site for planting. And with that, I'll pass it over to winter road salt calculator.
Hi, this is Deb. Actually, I was going to do the greener fleets. Perfect. Can you all see my screen okay?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. All right. So yes, I was going to present the greener fleets, and so this calculator calculates both greenhouse gas and cost effects, and also looks at the hydrocarbons in stormwater runoff. So it's kind of got both of those. So the main kinds of it has a few parts of types of information you're trying to put in. Um, One of these is which region you're currently in. There's a question I think about the landscaping calculator that looked at that asked, can you use it anywhere in in the country? We kind of went back and forth on this a little bit, and currently the pull down menus for which region you're in are restricted to region 2. We could add other states. But you can be a little bit specific. So for example, in New York, you can be in the Westchester, Long Island, or upstate New York, which is a little different for fuel. I am in upstate New York, so I'll pick that. You can put in how much does gas cost? This is pretty variable. So we're kind of not trying to provide that information and let someone put that in. So I'm going to say $3.50. I know it'll be up and down. Diesel fuel, and you might be working with diesel, replacing some diesel vehicles. I'm going to put $4 as my cost for diesel fuel. I'm not going to do anything with the biodiesel part. We're kind of tweaking this part of the calculator right now, so I'm going to kind of keep that in the background. But we did want to incorporate the use of biodiesel into the actions too. But for now, I'm going to kind of leave that aside. So how this one is set up, and it's a little bit different than other calculators that have come from Region 2 in the past, is that instead of being asked, how much fuel are you changing, it's just allowing you to just enter each individual or category of vehicles. So you kind of do this vehicle by vehicle. So I'm going to zoom in a little bit. So it's letting you enter them one at a time. So, pretend you wanted to replace, you're a small city and you wanted to replace your police motorcycles with electric. Also, it just seems cool to be dealing with motorcycles in this. And you can, I'll show you, if that was all you were doing, it will kind of show you how much gasoline you reduced, how much diesel. So there's just an assumption in the calculator that motorcycles are running on gasoline by kind of different categories of vehicles. We've in the background, there's an assumption, some of them are gasoline, some of them are diesel. Talk a little bit more about some of the other details of that. But you want to know how many you're thinking of replacing or will replace, how many miles per gallon. And then it just is this kind of a simple question. Are you replacing this with a hybrid vehicle, or you're replacing it with an electric vehicle? So you can kind of see if you're choosing hybrid or electric, you're going to get a little bit of a different result. And so, kind of just looking, if it were hybrid, you'd reduce less gasoline, you would reduce gasoline, but you wouldn't have any increase in electricity. And so that's going to affect how many hydrocarbons in runoff you avoided, how much greenhouse gas you avoided, and how much savings you had. And then just kind of, going through, you can add more vehicles. So we'll keep updating as you add vehicles. I guess there's two things I did want to show you on the specifics about the vehicles. One is, if you decided you were going with kind of a totally different class of vehicle, So for example, I'm going to say a school bus, because that's one that we did assume was diesel. You're replacing, say 10 school buses and they went the same distance. Um, sorry, you do have to, one thing we learned, you have to type in the distance. Otherwise you're going to think it's not working. And you replace that with an electric vehicle. Okay. You'll see two things. So first of all, we'll have a reduction in diesel fuel that's kind of added to our total here. And we're going to increase both our greenhouse gas emissions, our cost savings, um, and our hydrocarbon. So there's kind of a few notes I wanted to go through on, like what's going behind some of these, some of the assumptions. Um, so um, we were just assuming, a certain amount of greenhouse gas reduction. That's just the difference between what would have been produced by generating the energy in your region and by the greenhouse gas emissions that would have occurred from burning the fuel itself. So it's this kind of difference between the two. For hydrocarbons, this is for stormwater people. This is looking at total hydrocarbons. We haven't yet tried to convert that to polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons, which is often what you're measuring in stormwater runoff. So this might be a little bit in production here. And we were kind of put together a string of assumptions about, how much of gasoline is spilled at the gas station. So kind of relate that to how much just oil spills we might expect, like just from oil drips, which you'd think would be reduced by electric vehicles, since they don't have all of that stuff. And so we kind of converted that into a cost savings. Another thing I did want to look at a little bit is you can do a customized vehicle. This is, because as we're trying to put them in, we just, use data to look at these large classes of vehicles. But, you might have a particular kind of vehicle you're trying to purchase, or a particular kind of vehicle you're replacing that, maybe it has terrible gas mileage for its class. So, could say we're replacing one custom vehicle, maybe this goes same distance, 12,000 miles a year. You can put whatever you want though. You can say, whatever for your custom vehicle, maybe it's diesel and it currently gets, only gets 2 miles to the gallon. And you can replace that, just as a shorthand, if you say hybrid, hybrid can mean just very efficient. Hybrid just means it's a new gas mileage. Electric means it runs entirely on electric. So, we'll just say you're replacing it with a hybrid, but the hybrid does, way better. It gets 10 miles to the gallon. And that can be kind of a custom action that you do, and that gets added to it. I guess one other thing I did want to show on this calculator, this relates a little bit to the region piece of it, and I just put in one example that says you're replacing 12 cars, just like, passenger vehicles, and you're replacing them with electric vehicles. The calculator is sensitive in certain ways to where you're located. So I'm gonna bring this down, zoom down a little bit. If you were in, pretend upstate New York, so upstate New York has a very clean grid, or a very low carbon grid. So if you were in upstate New York and replace those vehicles, you would have a cost savings of about 11,000, but about 33 megaton reduction in greenhouse gases. The hydrocarbon runoff is insensitive to where you are. It's just the same amount no matter what. But the greenhouse gas reductions you'll see were higher. Are 33 if you're in Long Island. If you move to, I'm sorry, if you're in upstate New York, if you went to Long Island, those would be reduced to about 24 just because there's not as much, there's more fossil fuel in their grid. Cost savings are the same because we kind of aggregated the cost by the state at the state scale. If you went to Puerto Rico and the Virgin Islands, though, you'd see your cost savings are much less and your greenhouse gas reduction is much less as well. So, it might help you to decide, well, maybe a hybrid vehicle might be better if I'm someplace that doesn't have a very clean grid. But again, on the stormwater, we didn't really have any particular change. That's all I had on that calculator. So I'm going to stop sharing and pass back, I think, to Adrian.
Thanks, Deb, and Sammy and Paige and Lisa. I'm going to figure out how to turn my video on here. Oops, I turned it on and then off. I don't know why it's not working. Anyway, okay, there we go. We are going to stop at this point and just address some of the questions that I've seen come in. I think, Sammy, I'm just going to go through, I think, let's see, someone asked, you guys can all see this too, but someone asked if the sustainable planting impact calculator relies locally on specific information or does it work for all EPA regions? Deb, you kind of talked about this too. It is by zip code, I believe. So whatever the data source you guys use does incorporate the entire US, correct?
If it functions off the zip code, and that's the first selection that you enter into the calculator.
And then I think the other question you sort of addressed, Deb, but maybe more explicitly you can address if the EV calculator takes into consideration the usage of electricity to charge the electric vehicles.
Yeah, yes, it does. So and that's kind of a big part of why you're entering the region that you're in, so that it calculates. So if you say you have for example, a car that's electric, there's kind of built into that an assumption of how many kilowatt hours per mile that's used to calculate how much additional electricity you need to supply. And so that we used EPA data from something called eGrid that that tells you how much CO2 equivalent per electric. And then we just compare that to how much gasoline or diesel you would have reduced. And so so it is kind of built in there. But I would say, like, on this is a little bit of an aside to this, but the costs and it's only kind of that downstream effect. The calculator's not looking at, did it take a different amount of energy to produce an electric vehicle, or did it last longer or last shorter, or any of that? It's really just about the fuel or electric.
All right, thank you guys so much. Again, just feel free to keep putting questions in the chat box. We're going to move on to Choose Your Own Adventure, which will just be kind of, you guys develop the scenario and we'll run through the toolkit and how someone might approach the toolkit with that scenario. So our first adventure is about Harry, and Harry works at some department for a small governance located in some place. Recently, the governance passed a regulation that a certain pollutant needed to be reduced to protect the environment, local economy, and human health. And as a government employee, Harry would like to evaluate what can be done by his department. So, Chris, if you want to launch that poll that's going to fill in those blanks, that would be great. Give you guys a little bit of time to answer. Not getting a lot of rapid answers, but it looks like it's mostly overwhelmingly public works. So Harry works at a public works facility. The votes are still coming in on where Harry works. I'm gonna need a tiebreaker here. So if you haven't voted yet, jump on in. All right, I think we can work with this. Chris, do you want to just end the poll before anything else changes in that tie? So Harry works at a public works facility in New York, and he is concerned about nutrients. Okay, so we're going to jump to, once I find my, yeah, there we go, the toolkit. So Harry is going to want to jump on the Toolkit webpage, and he's going to read all of this upfront information. And he has a couple options when he gets here. He may decide that he wants to look at his public works operations and go through the spigot tool that Julie had talked about, or he might just want to jump right into looking for resources. I think I would recommend, if Harry is not been thinking about P2 too critically before, that he start with the spigot tool. I'm not going to go through that because Julie already did do that for us already, so he can go through all those operations that his department is responsible for, and then filter by, actually maybe I'll just pick one since we have a little bit of time. So he can go into this spigot and say he's mostly has his fleet that he's concerned about. Well, that's probably not going to get meant for nutrients. Let's say he, let's see, he has his fleet management. We'll just say, actually we can do this. He has his fleet he is managing, and he sees it as a high priority. And he answers that he so far is not doing any pollutant reduction or pollutant prevention practices with his fleet management, and he wants to filter by nutrients. Well, one of the actions he can take is using a biodegradable phosphate-free water-based detergents for fleet washing, and that's good for him to know. So he can print this and save it for his reference, and he can also then go back, knowing that fleet washing may be a great opportunity to be contributing to that pollutant reduction. He can go back in and find some relevant resources. So he is located in New York. So he can either enter the resource search through his geography, in which case he would get, and New York has a lot of resources, so I would almost recommend to Harry that he enter through his fleet management operation, because that's going to get him more specifically into what he's looking for. And then if he would like to, because now he still has a fair amount of resources to go through, now he can filter by his region, and he can kind of scan and see if he says anything specific about fleet washing. I know there are some in here, and if he can't, I know there's some in here, but there's but if he's having trouble finding, he doesn't want to go through all these. He can also go, I might not just be seeing it because it's I'm being recorded currently, but there's a one about fleet washing, and some of these other pollutant prevention checklists might have it. So let's say he finds it that way, or he's not satisfied with the results. He could also search for it in the search bar. Fleet washing. Here we go. So we can get some more information on that way. So there's a couple ways that Harry can really hone in on what he can be doing. Okay, so that was our first adventure. We're going to go to our second adventure now, which is in our PowerPoint. Here we go. Our second adventure is about Stella. And Stella works on a sustainability committee for a small governance located somewhere. Recently, the overarching governance passed regulation that a certain pollutant needs to be reduced to protect the environment, local economy, and human health. As a committee member, Stella would like to explore how her community can contribute to pollutant prevention. Chris, can you launch that poll? All right, so you guys get to choose the adventure this time again, and we'll give you guys a chance to respond. Let's see. A couple more responses. The geography is very tight race, so all right, let's just, I guess we'll stop there. Chris, if you want to share it. So Stella is in New Jersey, and she is interested in preventing, tight race there too, trash and plastics. So we're going to go to our toolkit again. So we can, because Stella is really going to hone in on her pollutant of concern, she could again go through the operations assessment. She's not a part of a municipal operation. She's on a sustainability committee. That might not be the best starting point for her. She might want to come in with a little more knowledge of different operations. So she may come in through New Jersey, the regional. And then again, to filter by operation might be overwhelming for her if she's on a committee. So maybe she doesn't want to do that. But she could go through the New Jersey resources, which would be more of a filtering for plastics. Or she could go back and just use the search bar again. And then she gets several resources about, this is again within, it's in the online Watershed library, but it's within the toolkit. And she gets several resources on plastic reduction opportunities in a variety of places. And she may, since she's in New Jersey, she could filter by region if she wanted to do that. Although this you wouldn't think would come up, but anyway, a couple of refining things here to do. But those are the two avenues for which people can get into the toolkit, and we just wanted to illustrate that for you. I am going to do, I guess we can, I don't know if we can save the questions for the end. I do want to do, actually, do we have questions? I'm sorry. All right, we actually could stop here and do questions because I don't think I have another stopping point. Are there any other questions? Feel free also to answer. I think some people have asked more broad questions like what are the drivers of P2 in your community, or there's a couple other questions. If you, another one that Deb asked is, we are in the process of adding a few more calculators, but if there's something that jumps out that would be useful, let us know please in the chat box. for a calculator. And one last poll to make sure everyone's still paying attention. How likely will the tools and resources provided in the toolkit be of assistance in implementing your pollution prevention programs and goals? Answers are very likely, somewhat likely, unlikely, or I will never use this toolkit. Okay. I think this is about the responses we were getting for the Choose Your Own Adventure too, in terms of numbers. So Chris, if you want to go ahead and share, it looks like this toolkit is going to be one of many tools being used. It's somewhat likely, which is great to see. That is, I think, the end of our content. I do just want to point out that I'm giving you guys my information as the project manager of the project. Feel free to reach out if you have any questions or comments or thoughts or anything like that. I can get you in touch with the CWP team that worked on this project is large, and if I can't answer the question, I can direct you to the team member who can. So feel free to reach out if you have any questions come up, or as you're using the toolkit you have any feedback. That would be great. And that concludes our presentation and webcast, but I do also want to mention that this gives time. Everybody has time in their calendar now to fill out that post-evaluation questions, and so if you guys don't mind doing that, that would be great and helpful for us. So thank you so much for coming, and have a great afternoon.
I'd also like to mention that we do have a second webcast coming up with the case studies. That would be May 28th. If you're interested in registering, I believe an email went out with the link for that. But we'd love to see you come and attend that one as well. Thanks.
Thank you, Chris.